In this video, I wanted to cover something that's very, very, very important. And today we are going to jump into the computer and I'm going to show you how to create sequences that are rock solid. Jumping into the computer here, we've got our bin structure all set up with how we are going to keep this project organized. And we're gonna jump into cuts here. And the first thing that we can do is there's a few options for creating sequences. I'm gonna create a new sequence. And I usually have predetermined how I want my final sequence to be. And so I go to this button here, it says new item, and you go to sequence, and you can choose from all these settings. Usually defaults to the ARRI 1080p or whatever it is. So we'll just use based off of that. And I'm gonna call this Basics of Premiere Pro. One thing that I have gotten in the habit of doing is when labeling my sequences, I always end with an underscore 01.0. And I have a very specific reason for doing this. I don't like having version 1 and version 2 and version 3 final, version 3 final point 2, version final remix. Make it easy on yourself. Treat your edits like versioning of software. I have 1.0. If I do a minor change, I can switch it to 1.1, or something fails on the project, I need to recreate the sequence, 1.2. And so then I deliver my notes, I get some notes, and all of a sudden we jump to version 2.0. So it makes it super easy. You get the latest version of the edit, and you're not dealing with all of these things that say final, and double final adjusted. It just makes it simple, and then you are good to go. So we're gonna label this 1.0. In your settings, you've got all of your additional stuff. So square pixels is 1 pixel to 1 pixel. Sometimes if you were dealing with mini DV tapes or you have to unsqueeze footage and stuff like that, that maybe was shot with an anamorphic lens, you have these options here of D1 or DV NTSC, anamorphic 2.1, HD anamorphic 1080. So you've got all of these de-squeezing or squeeze pixel aspect ratio conversions that will automatically fix your footage. So you're not changing percentages and scaling things. The next is your fields. Now, there's a big difference between each one of these. There's progressive scan, upper field first, and lower field first. So if you're wondering what all of this is the upper field and lower field and progressive scan depends on your footage and how it's recorded. If you watch on your TV, you've got oftentimes 1080p and 1080i, and that is the difference between progressive scan and interlaced. And what you'll see is the footage for progressive scan creates an image with all the pixels at once. So it's like each image is using all pixels. When it gets into interlaced, you have every other pixel, and it records half of the image at one part of the second, and then on every other pixel, and then the rest of the image or the other part of the image with the other pixels. And so if you see a lot of this old footage where it looks like there's a bunch of jaggedy lines, it's because the person or subject or the image moved, and you're pulling a still frame that's half of the pixels are recorded where the image was at one point, and then the other half of the pixels were recorded at the other point, or lines. So with that over explanation, you've got upper field first and lower field first. And what that means is the upper fields, all the odd numbers, for example, started the image, and that is the first section of the image. And then the second part of the image was recorded on all the even lines. That's basically the upper field. The lower field means that the even lines or something to that effect was recorded first, and then the odd lines were followed up. And so if you swap those two, your image will stutter because it's playing the end first than the beginning instead of playing beginning to end. That is what your fields are. I'm recording everything progressive, so it's just good to go. It's more mimics film. There's no like video interlacing that you get in soap operas, and that's one thing that I don't like about interlaced. It feels too daytime TV. Your format, display format, is the time code or the frames per second of your timeline. So how it's playing back. I shoot everything at 23.976, so it has a closer to film speed. Film is recorded at 24 frames per second, then they introduce digital, and then there's the NTSC standard, and keeping things in sync with the 29.97 North America NTSC standard, and then it gets complicated. That's what the format is. The audio is probably one of the most important things to be aware of in setting up your sequence. And that is because you cannot adjust the audio of your sequence after it's been created. It's locked in, and that's it. And that has bitten me in the behind many times. And talking with Adobe, they mentioned that this is something that is not adjustable after the sequence is created. So keep that in mind for your huge projects, especially when working with multicam footage. You got your audio previews, and this is what Adobe creates when you render a file. You can adjust this, which is usually set or locked into place depending on your editing mode. You just have to go through and make adjustments. An example might be you change your frame rate. You go to custom, and it allows you to do video preview adjustments. And switch that to 720, click outside and not enter, and it changes it to a lower HD quality, or you stick with 1080. All depends. You could even come in here and switch to QuickTime and do like ProRes proxy or something. Might be something to work with. That is your sequence setup. Then you've got maximum bit depth. So if your footage is 10 bit, you do that and it will render everything at as high bit depth as your footage allows. Maximum render quality, the same thing. It does sometimes slow things down. And then composite and linear color is if you've got some graphics heavy processing and you've got a GPU, then you can do that. That is the setting side. Then you've got tracks, and this is where the audio lock-in comes into play. Typically, you've got your basic is stereo, and you're working with a bunch of standard tracks such as this, and you're going to be outputting to stereo. If you're working with something that you're going to deliver to a network, you might edit in stereo just for the ease of stuff, but usually you want to set up like a multi-channel sequence to do this. So you would go to stereo or the master, and I always go to multi-channel. And then this gives you a lot of your options. A lot of networks and delivery requirements will have left and right dialogue, left and right sound effects, and then you've got a music channel. It's usually like 8 channels is what it ends up being. So you come down here, select 8. You can go up to 32 with this, but let's just say 8. And you see there's only 4 tracks here still. So you might hit this button here to add your additional tracks. And this is where things have messed up for me quite often. So let's just label these to start off. Let's just say dialogue. Dialogue, left, dialogue, R, and then you might have music left and music right. And the reason I'm doing left and right is because it will eventually be stereo. Then we do this. SFX1 and SFX, let's just copy this. 2, 3, and 4. Now the reason you have something like this is you've got your dialogue that you're working with, and then you've got your sound effects and music. and you can mute your dialogue and just give someone your sound effects and music, and it's called an M&E track, music and effects. And that allows people to go in and dub over the voice. Let's say it's you shoot a movie in the United States, but you want it to play in India, and they will record all of that in the native language without having all of your English dialogue in there, or Germany, or France, or whatever. You can change the language and still have your sound effects and music that doesn't have to be redone. So that's what that would be for. But we're not quite done here. To know how this multi-channel stereo thing works, you would go to output settings and see channels 1 and 2, left and right. You keep that like so. And same thing with this. You're still not quite done, because if this is the left, we want to pan left and then pan right. Pan left, pan right. Pan left, pan right. Pan left, pan right. And that is how you would set up a multi-channel sequence. But most of you, if you're creating YouTube videos, you can just stick with stereo and you'll be good. Just like switch back to here and it sort of does it. But that's how you might run into it. You can leave all of this and just double click. Nope, you just click here, hit 0, and you can go through and fix all of this stuff here. So I haven't played with open, but let's see what open does. If checked, this track will be expanded by default in the timeline. So that is the basics of creating your sequences. There is more that we will learn, but we will go into that in our multicam deal that's coming in the future. So hopefully that helps you. Check out my playlist that I put together with all of my tricks and tips for doing Adobe Premiere work efficiently, and I hope it helps you in some way, because that's the point here, to help you be efficient and get things done without them breaking. I'll see you in the next video.